For point 4, an analysis of contradictory behaviors in social protest movements. During the current protests in China, there are occasional instances of people displaying portraits of Mao Zedong. The protest on July 10, 2022, by depositors of Henan village banks is the most typical example. A large portrait of Mao Zedong was posted, and nearly 2,000 rights defenders gathered outside the People's Bank of Henan province. They also carried self-made banners and chanted, "People's Bank and CCP Underworld," and Li Keqiang investigates Henan. This shows that they still have some cognitive errors and emotional biases about their current situation. They may have limited understanding of the fact that excessive concentration of political power necessarily leads to an unfair distribution of economic resources. Even less do they comprehend the inexorable contradiction that exists between the gradual reform ostensible by the authoritarian government and the more extensive reforms that financial markets demand. The mismatch between the two will unavoidably lead to a distorted financial pricing system and thereby various issues. The depositors of these village banks did not understand the above reason, and in the process of pursuing high-interest deposits, they lost both interest and principal. Due to their ignorance of the aforementioned explanation, the depositors of these village banks lost both principal and interest as a result of pursuing high-interest investment. Furthermore, it is not widely known that Xi Jinping has seized the political authority that was previously held by former Premier Li Keqiang. Even more difficult for them to comprehend is the fact that Mao Zedong's totalitarian regime is the root cause of corruption and ignorance. Because party-state education and propaganda have always intentionally and systemically distorted their cognition and emotions toward to what really happened in China. However, actual cases demonstrate that people's opposition to the totalitarian system and its idols is more significant in regions that are more economically developed and civilized. A girl waves an American flag and threw leaflets with selections from the Declaration of Independence outside the Bird's Nest National Stadium in Beijing, June 3, 2023. Liberal protesters in Hong Kong flooded the streets in 2019 while carrying American flags and young people adorned as the Statue of Liberty. Though I disagree with the overzealous pursuit for such Western political symbols, it does represent, at least in part, the knowledge of and distaste for totalitarian regimes among youth in economically developed areas, as well as their longing for freedom. For point 5, applications of such cognitive models and political strategy. Furthermore, one additional insight on diplomatic politics. The cognitive war has already begun in China. Wu Guoguang proposed that cognitive warfare will create a magical world around you, Chinese people, so that you may not believe what you see, but you believe what the regime told you. Chinese politicians, particularly diplomats, frequently assert that diplomacy is an extension of domestic matters. Will the Chinese government, in its extensive and methodical effort to manipulate Chinese people's belief and behavior, employ comparable diplomatic strategies on an international level? Hung analyses the way that CCP-China may take cognitive war against Taiwan and gives relevant countermeasures. Takagi recommends that the United States and its allies study collaborative operations in the cognitive, information, and physical domains as they counter CCP-China. 5. Conclusion. The paper is coming to an end at this point, but there are two issues that are less relevant to the topic of this article but are still important and need to be addressed. The first is, what kind of person Xi Jinping is as an emperor of a totalitarian country with high technology and advanced military weapons. This is an important question because the personal will of totalitarian rulers, as reflected in their political beliefs and governing behaviors, will affect the well-being of his own people and even people in neighboring countries. Another issue is that the CCP government has begun to educate and train young people for totalitarian regimes. What will this mean for China's future? There is also a significant link between the two subjects. 5.1 Xi's extreme personality and governing style. Starting with the first point, childhood's trauma is difficult to restore or heal, especially for communists who are both atheists and political combatants. Except for Mao, almost all CCP leaders and their descendants were persecuted during the Cultural Revolution. Xi Jinping, who is Xi Jinping's father, was politically persecuted in Mao's era. Despite being exempt from the death penalty, his father was imprisoned and forced to undergo labor reform. During the Cultural Revolution, Xi Jinping's home was confiscated by the Red Guards, and he was subsequently criticized and detained incommunicado until 1975. Xi Jinping was rehabilitated after 1976 and took power in Guangdong province after Mao's death in early 1978. Because of political persecution in her early years, Xi Jinping's mother was also compelled to participate in labor camps and re-education, leaving her unable to care for her children. Xi Jinping had a tragic childhood because of the political background of his parents. He claimed to have experienced more suffering than most people in a news interview 27 years ago. He was imprisoned 4 times during the Cultural Revolution and worked as a beggar, and he also volunteered to be sent to a remote and poor area to escape political persecution. Because of his early displacement, Xi lacked the necessary basic education. He has a Cultural Revolution complex and is arbitrary, extremely confident, and will never admit his mistakes. Li Rue is a liberal within the Chinese Communist Party. He was Mao Zedong's secretary and had good relations with Xi Jinping's father, Xi Jinping. When he was interviewed by Voice of America 5 years ago, he said while lying on the hospital bed, "I didn't know at that time that his education level was so low. He was only at primary school level." Scholars and political observers can easily deduce from Xi Jinping's governing style that, as a leader from the lost generation, he is filled with extreme insecurity about his power in the real world. Xi Jinping's traumatic life experience paved the way for his governing style after taking power. This is caused by the harsh political conflict and high information closure societal climate and cultural revolution. It appears not difficult to predict that Xi himself is more likely to become a tyrant in the future, based on the 3 factors: information exchange, personal experiences, and totalitarian control, that contribute to the generation of belief in the constrained reflection belief model. The fact that he and his family suffered during the Cultural Revolution, however, is what raises questions. Why, after seizing power, did he still opt for the route of totalitarianism rather than constitutional democracy? Based on the research topic of this essay, my tentative interpretation is that despite experiencing hardships in his early years, the turbulent and anarchic social environment at that time, as well as the party-state education imbued with a philosophy of struggle within the Chinese communist system, failed to provide him with a normative education for rational self-reflection on his life experiences. Essentially, this is also attributed to a lack of comprehensive understanding of what the truth is in Chinese society as a whole. This kind of deficiency was particularly pronounced during the Cultural Revolution. Therefore, Xi himself is also a victim of the centralized party-state system and that insane era. Due to cognitive, emotional, and cultural differences, this will inevitably lead to a huge awareness gap between him and the young people who grew up during the reform and opening up period. Then, the series of protests and resistances occurred after the extreme lockdown is not only reasonable, but also a historical necessity. 5.2 The cultivation of a new generation of red offspring. Then comes the second problem, which is that Xi Jinping's government is starting to plan on using widespread red education to develop his youthful, devoted supporters. Soon after he assumed office for a second term, this massive project started to take shape across the nation. In spring of 2019, all educational institutions in the southeastern province of Jiangxi, from kindergartens to colleges, are introducing red culture courses taught based on the specially prepared textbooks. In February of the same year, Hebei province required students to study Xi Jinping thought in Ping's language close to people, stories of Grandpa Xi, dictionary of Ping's language. Subsequently, Chinese teachers have assumed the dual role of serving as instruments for promoting totalitarian ideology and as primary targets of ideological manipulation. In recent years, there has been a gradual buildup of nationalist sentiment in Chinese society, accompanied by occasional occurrences of related news. If the pink internet celebrities from mainland China are still causing trouble at Japan's Nishi Queen restaurant for commercial reasons, maybe part of their strategy is to use aggressive activism to garner attention and rewards from their fans. It's more of a naked political prank for a Chinese student to wipe his nose on the plaque of the Republic of China's embassy in the Vatican in public. Pink or Little Pink is a term used to describe young radical nationalists or statists in China and elsewhere in recent years. They are called Pink or Little Pink because they are mindless Red China supporters who blindly believe in political propaganda and always engage in extremely political behaviors, whether in China or abroad. There are also some refined egoists among these people masquerading as Pink, but only to pursue personal interests. Little Red Guards are different from Pink because they need to be more loyal to Xi Jinping himself. Mao's fans mentioned later are the people who still worship Mao Zedong, and most of them are seniors. These classic cases also demonstrate the profound impact of various political brainwashing methods, such as red education in Communist China, on Chinese youth cognition and behavior. What concerns me the most is that, in the future, Xi Jinping's government will incite China's domestic pinks, Maofans, and his own little red guards to follow the path of cultural revolution rebellion in order to divert people's attention on economic downturns, increased unemployment, and international sanctions. At this point, this essay has basically come to an end. This essay concludes with the following essential points. Initially, social factions comprising business elites, intellectuals, the middle class, and young individuals in Chinese society are vehemently opposed to Xi Jinping's attempt to restore totalitarianism to the country, yet they continue to resist. Likewise, the power of their rebellions is extremely limited. Second, in order to maintain its ruling, CCP has never ceased influencing the cognitive processes of its citizens. Thirdly, economic globalization has significantly altered the cognitive and behavioral patterns of the Chinese people over the past 4 decades or so. When the totalitarian rulers of China come to this realization, they will inevitably choose to sever all communication between Chinese society and the outside world. Finally, in recent years, China's totalitarian government has undertaken the development of its own pinks and wolf warriors. These individuals may pose a risk to forthcoming social conflicts in China.